This is Hidden Killers with Tony Brueski. Here now, Tony Brueski.
Let's talk about one of the most grotesque phrases ever to crawl its way into a murder trial. Ethical non-monogamy. Now, if you hear that phrase in a coffee shop debate about modern relationships, fine. Adults can choose whatever arrangement they want, as long as everyone actually consents, understands, and agrees. But when that phrase comes out of the mouth of a preacher, a married pastor, in videos played for a jury after he's been shot dead by his side chick mistress, it becomes something else entirely. Meet the Preacher's Side Chick. It's that sequel to the movie that never came out, but it's playing out in a courtroom right now. It kind of becomes the slogan of delusion. Pastor Brodes Perry wasn't just a minister. He was the executive pastor at Mississippi Boulevard Christian Church in Memphis. A man of authority, charisma, community respect, kind of man people trusted with their faith, their families, and their secrets. And behind closed doors, according to video evidence, he was lecturing about ethical non-monogamy, the idea that he and his wife had an open marriage, that everything was above board, honest, transparent, and blessed with a mutual understanding, except his wife says she never agreed to any of it. Then that comes out. In court, prosecutors showed those videos. They played them for the jury. In them, Perry told Latoshia Daniels, the woman now on trial for killing him, that his wife Tabatha was perfectly fine with how I've handled it. That he was honest and transparent, and that he had boundaries about who he could see. He described their arrangement as ethical, as the moral vocabulary could somehow sanitize betrayal. But when Tabatha Perry took the stand, she was crystal clear. No, they did not have an open marriage. No, she did not know about Latoshia Daniels. No, she did not consent to anything. So let's call this what it is. Ethical non-monogamy? Not progressive relationships. This was deception dressed up as the language of self-help, a pastor creating theology around his own lust. Ethical non-monogamy, if I say it like with authority and the power invested in me, it makes it all right. And that's how this story starts. A man of God selling the illusion of moral control while living in chaos. Because what happens next was every bit as tragic as it was predictable. Perry met Latoshia Daniels years earlier in Little Rock, Arkansas. She wasn't just anyone. She was a social worker, a specialist in anger management and behavioral health. She taught others how to manage emotions, how to process betrayal, how to find control. And yet, according to investigators, she was drawn into a long relationship with a married preacher who told her that God, honesty, and his wife were all aligned behind his open approach. Daniels believed him. Maybe she wanted to. Maybe she needed to. Prosecutors say the affair started in 2017 and carried into 2018. When Perry left Little Rock for his new position in Memphis later that year, things changed. He had a bigger congregation, a new platform, and apparently a growing desire to put distance between himself and Daniels. The relationship fizzled, the communication, it slowed. Then, as one witness put it, Daniels began spiraling. She wasn't just angry, she was devastated because the version of reality she's been sold, the idea that she was part of the same consensual, enlightened, spiritually approved triangle, it was collapsing. And by 2019, the two were barely speaking. Perry was recommitting to his family, his image, his future in the church. And Daniels, the woman who'd been told she was specially chosen, ethically included, felt discarded. In March of 2019, she bought a Ruger 9mm handgun in Arkansas, 6 hours before the murder. She bought some ammo. Then she drove 3 hours to Tennessee. At this point, nothing about this story was ethical. It was a rage disguised as heartbreak and delusion disguised as faith. Then on the night of April 4th, 2019, the pastor, Mr. Perry, and his wife, Tabatha, were at home in their apartment at Meridian Park. Around 9 or 10 p.m., there's a knock on the door. Surprise! It's Latoshia. Tabatha recognizes her from their time in Little Rock. She lets her in, polite, cautious, unaware of what's actually coming. The two women talk for 40 minutes, allegedly. Daniels is calm. At least that's how it starts. She says she wants closure. She wants understanding. She wants to talk to the pastor. And when he arrives, Tabatha senses tension. They all sit in the living room. Words are exchanged. We don't have a transcript, but what we kind of know where it allegedly ends. Tabatha eventually stands up to walk Daniels out. The conversation feels done. The door opens. And that's when, according to police and the surviving witness, Daniels allegedly reaches into her bag, pulls out that Ruger, and fires. The pastor, Brodes Perry, is hit multiple times, chest, torso, head. Tabatha rushes to him, kneels beside him, and Daniels turns the gun on her and fires again. "You broke my heart," she screams. "I didn't mean to," she says moments later. When officers arrive, they find Perry dying, his wife bleeding from her shoulder wound, and Daniels still holding the gun. She's frantic, but she doesn't drop it. She's arrested on the spot. Let's pause here, because this is the moment where every lie, every half-truth, every self-justifying sermon about ethics crashes into cold reality. A preacher who preached love and morality was dead. A woman who built a career around emotional control was in handcuffs for murder. And a wife who'd been told nothing of any open arrangement was left bleeding in her own home. That's what happens when delusion meets denial. People die, and the words that once sounded spiritual turn to poison. In the courtroom, years later, that poison finally got exposed, and that's what we're watching right now. The prosecution laid it out bluntly. Daniels was not a random visitor. She was a woman who bought a gun 6 hours before showing up, drove across state lines, and fired multiple shots into the man who betrayed her. Premeditation, they said, cold and deliberate. The defense countered with emotion. They said this wasn't a calculated hit. It was an emotional break, the final collapse of a woman who believed everything Perry told her. And that's the twisted center of this story. How manipulation doesn't just destroy the people it's aimed at, but everyone orbiting it. Daniels believed Perry's words. Tabatha believed her marriage vows. And Perry believed he could keep preaching, keep lying, keep juggling truth like it was just another sermon metaphor. When the judge heard those ethical non-monogamy videos, when they watched a preacher explaining how honesty meant sleeping with another woman while claiming his wife approved, you could feel the moral gravity shift. Because this wasn't about polyamory or modern love or alternative lifestyles. It was about deceit, ego, and power. It was about a man using progressive language as a shield to hide behind. And that's the most infuriating part, the weaponizing of ethics. He didn't just cheat, he branded his cheating as virtue. He reframed dishonesty as honesty, betrayal as enlightenment. And when people who live inside that level of self-delusion get caught, when the lie starts to crumble, somebody always gets hurt. The trial itself has been a slow unmasking. Day after day, witnesses describe the dual worlds Perry lived in. The church world, buttoned up, relevant, powerful. And the secret world, the one where he explored non-monogamy, where he told Daniels she was chosen, where he built a bubble of justification. Tabatha Perry's testimony was brutal. She sat on that stand and told the world her marriage was not open. She didn't know about any arrangement. She didn't agree to anything. She said she learned about it for the first time only after the shooting, when police told her what they'd found in his phone, what Daniels had said, and what the video contained. Imagine that moment, sitting in your courtroom listening to your dead husband's lover claim you were fine with it. Imagine being forced to relive the night you were shot while your husband's teaching on sexual ethics play for a jury. That is not healing. That is a direct ticket to hell. And yet there's another layer here. One that says as much about the culture of image as it does about infidelity, because Brodes Perry wasn't just an individual. He was part of a machine, the American megachurch ecosystem that thrives on charisma, influence, and perception. He had the title, the suits, the language of redemption. He built a brand of leadership that rewarded confidence more than accountability. And in that world, image becomes armor. When you're adored from the pulpit, It's easy to start believing your own mythology, that your desires are divinely sanctioned, your secrets are special, and your followers could never understand your depth. That's where hypocrisy metastasizes, not in one affair, but in the conviction that you're too spiritual to be a hypocrite. It's the oldest story in organized religion. The shepherd convincing himself he's above the sheep. By the time Daniels pulled the trigger, every person in the triangle was living a different universe. Perry thought he could quietly manage that fallout. Daniels thought she'd been promised love, validation, maybe even divine approval. And Tabatha thought she was still married to a faithful man of God. None of them were living in reality anymore. So when people try to explain this case as a crime of passion, that doesn't do it justice. This wasn't just passion, it was narrative collapse. When the lies finally broke, everything holding their worlds together imploded. Now the courtroom becomes the reckoning ground. Jurors have heard about the gun purchase 6 hours before the killing. They've seen the text messages. They've watched the videos of a preacher justifying what could be justified. And they've heard the widow's denial, the shock of learning her husband was living a double life. No matter what verdict the jury reaches, that's the truth now written in stone. The only ethical thing in this story is that everyone's true self finally came out. So where does that leave us? It leaves us staring straight into the abyss of hypocrisy, the kind that hides behind titles and theology, because Perry didn't invent hypocrisy. He just dressed it up better. He gave it a TED Talk vocabulary and a pastoral smile. He wrapped deceit in language that sounded sophisticated, ethical non-monogamy, like a moral cheat code. And in the end, it cost him his life. It's easy to judge Latoshia Daniels as simply the villain here. She shot 2 people, 1 dead, 1 barely surviving. There's no world where that's excusable. But if we stop there, we miss the deeper sickness that set the stage. The man who thought the rules didn't apply to him, who blurred the line between sermon and seduction, who convinced someone vulnerable that betrayal was enlightenment. The tragedy isn't just the murder, it's that everyone involved thought they were living in a story where they were right. Perry thought he was progressive. Daniels thought she was loved. Tabatha thought she was safe. None of them were. And that's the moral rot at the heart of the whole case. When people in positions of power, especially spiritual ones, start treating truth as optional, language as camouflage, and accountability as persecution, it's only a matter of time before something breaks. A preacher can lie to his congregation. He can lie to his wife. He can even lie to himself, but he can't lie to a bullet. The term ethical non-monogamy was supposed to make deceit sound enlightened. Instead, it became evidence. It became the audio that prosecutors played to show motive, manipulation, and moral decay. It became the phrase that stripped away every illusion. And for the congregation back in Memphis, the one that trusted this man to guide them towards virtue, it became the ghost of a sermon they'll never forget. Because no matter how eloquent the words, you can't preach about truth while you're living a lie. It's not just about murder. It's about how easily language can corrupt morality and how self-justification can masquerade as ethics. And now, in the end, no vocabulary is sophisticated enough to excuse betrayal. You can call it open, you can call it ethical, you can even call it non-monogamy. But if one person doesn't know, if one person didn't agree, if one person gets shot, there's nothing ethical about it. That's the real sermon here. And it's the one the congregation never asked to hear. Give me your thoughts in the comments section on YouTube. If you're not already there, just search Hidden Killers with Tony Brueski. Would love to get your feedback. If you're already watching us on YouTube, search that wherever you get podcasts, so you don't miss any of our commentary on the cases we cover right here. I am Tony Brueski, and we will talk again real.
Want more on this case and others? Then press subscribe now and don't miss a moment of true crime coverage from Tony Brueski and the Hidden Killers podcast.